The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.
Facebook Live, if you are punching us up, maybe you're at the office and you're taking a look at these roster cuts, we're definitely going to tear through them. Joe C. from XL Primetime, our head coach Dave Campo, as we get it cranked up. And we just got the 53. It doesn't mean this is the 53 that will suit up in a couple of Sundays, but let's get into it, Coach. Let's try and entertain the masses, all of Duval trying to figure out what this roster was going to look like. And I'll just start off asking you, this looked to me like one of the toughest 53-man rosters in a while for Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think they've proven that in preseason with the way the backup guys have played. And there's guys on here that you would have said, okay, are these guys on the bubble? And you'd have probably 6, 7, 8 guys that are on the bubble that did not make it. So that, to me, that means that you've got guys that could have been players that didn't make it, which is good for the entire roster.
All right, so now we're looking at a few guys, and we'll just go through this. And basically, the best way we can describe this is that they had a good roster going into camp, 90 players. They wanted to whittle it down to 53 by this afternoon. And then you start to take a look and you turn loose some guys. And there's designations for a handful of them. Some of them can be signed immediately to the practice squad. The other ones have to go through waivers. Other ones have been released as injured. So there's a lot of different things. But after we do the 53, I think there's some attractive players that you hope come back to Duval.
Absolutely. And I think that, the interesting thing about the entire thing is that some of the guys that we thought would bring them a little experience, they let them go.
Yeah.
So they're looking at developmental. And, Shad said that recently. And we got to start developing our guys and not taking everybody in free agency.
It's true. It's true.
So, they've got some guys on there they picked development over. And the two examples I have is Edmunds, the safety, and Flowers, a corner. Both of those guys, I think, are good enough players to help the football team. Yeah. But there are some young guys that are pretty good players too, and they're gonna go with the developmental end.
It's funny because you and I have kind of gravitated to those two, either a cornerback or safety. I'm an Edmunds guy. You're a Flowers guy. I really like Terrell. I thought he could come in here and help this football team as a sure tackler, just a guy with experience and hungry and all that kind of stuff. Well, anyway, I'm going to take what you just said, turn it into a little conspiracy theory, because I already tweeted this out, that after Shad Khan put the directive out there that basically said we need to be more successful in the draft than we do in free agency. I'm tired of writing checks, basically, is what he said.
Right.
And so even though these weren't high-priced free agents, Coach, they were free agents that were brought in and signed. And I think now Balky's doubling down to prove that his draft works. But it's kind of funny. Releasing Braswell and Hallett, you could take a look at these guys. He's even going for some undrafted guys over guys that he drafted.
I think the thing that it showed up in this camp was that they really gave a lot of players a chance to show who they are.
Okay.
For example, especially on defense, more so even than on offense. But, they played 4 different guys at nickel. They played, guys at end, outside rush. They played Lacey, who's an inside guy. They played him some at defensive end.
Yeah.
They gave guys a chance to show who they are, so that I don't think that they're just playing for this year. I think they're playing for the future of this franchise. And the window is probably a 4-year deal here that you're talking about, to where they've got a chance to be better each of those years if they do what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And so they've leaned towards some of the younger players that they feel showed that they are capable of being in the league. One of them being Prince.
Right.
Prince runs easy. I think Prince is going to be a pretty good football player. So, there's a guy that probably didn't show up that much in preseason.
Right.
But he's got talent and he's got a chance to be a good player.
Yeah, I like to call him the hottie toddy Prince. I like him. And I think that between him and Jari and Jones, whenever you and I, or whenever we went over this in the offseason, you punched the tape in and I saw 2 guys that I've always asked you about that they They make quick decisions, good decisions. They drive on the receiver, and they really track the ball well.
And they can run.
Yeah.
You know,
and so I like both of them, but the Amanis of the world, some of the other guys that they brought in, it was just interesting to see basically how they rotated. And then a second-year Braswell versus a rookie in DeAndre Prince, making those types of decisions.
And I'm sure that Braswell, if he doesn't get picked up, which I don't think he will,
right,
he'll end up on the practice squad.
Yeah.
And, again, now you're looking at what does he become during the season? Because if you have an injury, somebody's coming back.
Right.
And then how will he handle off season for next year? Which I think guys like Bigsby and Strange and some of those guys are showing that the second year guys, that's why I thought DJ Coleman had a chance to make it, because this was his second year. I thought he did some real good things, but they're counting Armstead as a defensive end, and that ended his operation for this year.
And like we said, none of this is solid, and you can even go into that first week with less than 53 and then sign another guy after the beginning of the first week and not guarantee him a full contract for the year. Let's just run through the numbers real quick. 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, not a surprise. They decided to release C.J. Beathard. He's a guy that obviously can come back on the practice squad. 6 wide receivers. We've talked about it a bunch. Will they keep 6? Will they keep 7? They kept the guys that you guys would most likely expect, waiving Elijah Cook, keeping Tim Jones.
Right.
3 tight ends. I thought they might take 4. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. And then 10 offensive linemen. So let's just stay on the offense numbers-wise. Those numbers they don't shock Coach, because Coach, you pretty much nailed those. But anyway, what shocked you as far as names on the offense?
Well, to me, Van Lanen probably sticks out. Yeah. And I thought he had a great camp. I thought he outplayed Foster, the young kid.
Yeah.
But they kept Foster, which is smart because he has some talent.
Sure.
Some guys react quicker, as we've seen, when they first get here.
Right.
Or are they second-year guys that kind of come back and get out there? And Foster is going to probably be one of those guys. But Van Lanen probably was one that was, questionable at the beginning. They released Hance, who was a factor a year ago. They like Van Lanen better. So that's good right there. The other one that surprised me a little bit was Degura. I thought Degura was going to make the team. I thought he did enough in preseason, but it's because they kept the extra linemen, and the linemen are tough to find.
It's true.
If you can find some that have some talent, keep them and develop them. Because those guys are hard to come by.
Yeah, and I get it. It's so funny because I kind of locked in my brain that they were going to need to keep 4 tight ends because they were going to run 2 tight end set, and a lot of 2 tight end set. And so we were talking about this on the show yesterday, and I might have been pulled away from the 4 number and went down to 3 based on what you have said and what others have said, is that 10 count for offensive linemen trumps that extra tight end.
Correct.
And you can pull him on and off your practice roster if it is a Deguara, if it is a guy like that.
Right. The other thing is that if you've got if you're in a short yardage situation, it's very easy to take. They can go 2 tight ends, obviously. They got Farrell and Ingram.
Yeah.
But in a short yardage situation, you can use one of those tackles as a tight end.
Right.
If you want to make sure you're going to load up with the front.
True.
So having the extra lineman is good, I think, unless the tight end was going to be a big-time factor for you.
Right.
Or he was a great special teams player. That's where you lose a guy in there.
I get it. Javon Foster, let's just put a question mark next to his name. He's another 4th rounder that has a question mark next to his name. You can go back to last year with the 4th rounders and Ventrell Miller and Tyler Lacey, all right, that you wanted to see them make plays. The last thing you wanted to see is them not make the roster. But Ventrell Miller went on IR last year. Tyler Lacey did play, but not play a lot. All right, so we've hit the offense. I wanted Elijah Cooks to make this squad. He did not. It doesn't mean that he won't be back, but reality is reality. And we've said it, and I've explained it to many people. Why can't Cooks find a spot on this team? Well, because Tim Jones plays more plays on special teams and does it well than Elijah Cooks would be as the 6th wide receiver. That's just the way it is.
Yep. That's the way. You have to build your roster that way. Remember, you got to win 2 phases every week to win.
Mm-hmm.
Offense and defense,
right.
Offensive special teams,
right.
Defensive special teams. So special teams shows up in 2 situations.
Yeah, it really does.
And that, to me, is why Tim Jones is there, because he's a core special teams player.
Mm-hmm.
And, he can catch a ball now, and he can run a route.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like he's, just a guy they're keeping for special teams. The kid's not that bad a receiver.
No. And he is one of those do-everything guys, which is extremely valuable. Parker Washington has emerged as more of a receiving threat than just a special teams guy. Devin Duvernay, you know how much I like him.
Yep.
And so those guys represent playmaking possibilities in the receiver game. All right, so now let's get to the defensive side of the football. And again, numbers being what they are. And this is what you and I were trying to figure out. They kept a half dozen linebackers. They kept 9 defensive backs and 11 defensive linemen. That's interesting as well. So let's hit this real quick, Coach. Starting with the linebackers, this was not unpredictable at all when you start taking a look at the guys they decided to keep. At the top of the list, as you might expect, Foyer's the leader, even though you might see Devin Lloyd playing the middle linebacker spot. But you have Foyer, Devin Lloyd, Chad Muma, Ventrell Miller makes the squad, Yasir Abdullah, and Caleb Johnson.
Yeah, to me, that's predictable from the standpoint that I thought Abdullah made a move this year.
Yeah.
In the scheme, when they go base defense, he can play the Sam linebacker.
Right.
He showed me he can be off the ball.
Okay.
Which is, I've said that right along.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing is, I saw him on a bunch of special teams.
Mm-hmm.
And with this new kickoff rule and all that, it's even more of a reason for linebackers to be on the roster,
right? Because
of the way they're using special teams this year. So, and then Caleb Johnson is an excellent special teams player. Mm-hmm. So you've got some pretty good guys there.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're looking for right now is how many of these guys make the most sense, can play, stay healthy, have had good camps, all those things. Everything's got to add up. Doesn't mean that they won't have guys coming on and off. But Yasir Abdullah earned a spot on this football team.
He did. He came out and he played well enough to make the team. Yeah. And Ventrell is a very instinctive football player. Mm-hmm. He's a good one to have because he can run. He's smart. He's pretty physical for his size. So I'm happy he's here.
Now, I don't want to make too much of a preseason, but if you're looking back and you take a look at number 90, Odemiwo made plays, and that very likely was maybe the one thing that swung him onto the 53-man as opposed to maybe going to the practice squad. So you have 11 defensive linemen, Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon, Devon Hamilton, Eric Armstead. Those are the guys that you're going to count on as your first 4. After that, you have interesting storylines. Mason Smith as a second-round draft pick. I was critical of it, but right now he looks pretty good. I just meant with that second-round pick. I think they could have gotten him a little bit later. But bottom line is they like what they've got. They went out and got Miles Cole in the 7th round. Love that guy as far as tremendous upside for a 7th-round pick. And then Odemiwo makes the squad. Tyler Lacey makes the squad. Roy Robertson Harris, Jordan Jefferson, and Jeremiah Ledbetter.
Well, here's my take on that front.
Okay.
They are way better than they were a year ago, in my opinion. And here's why I say that. I think Hamilton has come back to where he was when they brought him in and gave him the contract, gave him the big contract before last year. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go a step further on Mason Smith.
Okay.
Mason Smith is going to be a big time factor this year. Not only do I think he could line up next to Armstead now and be a player. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. But if you watched him, his hands and his quickness and his swim move and all that, he is going to be a factor on 3rd down inside pass rush. Mm-hmm. This guy's got a chance to be a big-time player. Jefferson is stronger than both of those two guys.
It's crazy. Now, listen to this. Okay, this is what gets me a little bit, and I'm kind of blown away by this. Eric Armstead has made a living inside, obviously can go outside, which is what you're expecting, 6'7", 290. So he's lighter than what you might expect interior linemen to be. Meanwhile, next to him is Devon Hamilton. He is 3 inches shorter and carrying 40 more pounds. He's 335. And then you have Jordan Jefferson, as you just mentioned, 6'2", 316.
Jordan Jefferson makes Devon Hamilton a small-time lifter.
Really?
Jefferson is stronger than Hamilton is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is he ready 100%?
Right.
He's a role. He's a when they rotate him, he's going to be in there. So they've made improvement. And Atomwo, whatever his name is.
Yeah, Odomiwo
did everything that he was asked to do. So it looks to me like they're actually counting Armstead as a defensive end.
Yeah, which is very interesting.
Because, they only kept 3 outside rushers, and he'd be the 4th one.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like, and I'm just kind of stuck here, but you're looking at the big end, Miles Cole and Odomiwo, they're both 6'6", 6'5", 280, right around there, 275, 280. And so both of those guys can be that big end, and then obviously down and distance situations, you know better than I, they're going to rotate the heck out of those guys and create as many possibilities for mismatches.
Right. So I'm pleased. I think that's a good – listen, the game is won within 2 yards of each other.
Pretty much.
How you play up front wins the majority of the games when you look at it. There's some window dressing with some of these Brian Thomases and, the guy under the center and the guys up front win the game for you.
And can you assert your will on your opponent?
Absolutely.
And that's blocking and that's not being blocked. It's both of them.
Right.
The back end. And this is, again, interesting, maybe not set in stone. They decided right now with 4 safeties and not counting Dewey, Andrew Wingard will begin the year on injured reserve, but they now have a total carrying 9 defensive backs. That's 4 safeties. That's 5 cornerbacks.
The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.
Cisco, Antonio Johnson, those are going to be your first 2, right, at safety.
Correct.
Coach.
Yep.
Then Darnell Savage is listed as a safety, but we know he's going to be nickel. And then you got Daniel Thomas as a backup safety, but also very, very reliable when it comes to special teams.
Right.
Cornerbacks, Jarian Jones.
Yep.
DeAndre Prince. That's a 3rd and a 5th rounder, coach, or a 6th rounder? Anyway, a later round draft pick in the Hottie Toddy Prince. Jarian, DeAndre, Monteric Brown, now in his 3rd year out of Arkansas, Tyson Campbell, Ronald Darby.
Yeah. And again, I think, if there was an area that they might try to pick up somebody, that might be it. I'm talking about the corner position.
Yeah.
Because you've really got 2 guys that you really don't know how they're going to play. Jarian Jones and Prince.
True.
You don't know how they're going to play when everything's flying. Because Brown has shown that he can play in the league.
Right.
So I'm okay with that one. So really, to me, he's the 3rd guy. Okay. You got Campbell and Darby and Jarian. Campbell, Darby, and Brown. And then you got Savage as the nickel. So in some ways, he's a safety corner combination.
Right.
And that's why they let Braswell go, because they really have 2 guys that can do that. Antonio Johnson can play the nickel position. So you've got Jarian, who played it some.
So you've got Jarian, Antonio, and Savage that can all play the nickel.
Absolutely.
And then 2 guys can play safety, 1 guy can play outside the corner.
And then they're counting on those guys being able, number 1, Johnson to be the starting safety, and on Monteric Brown as being the first substitute on the outside.
And he was pressed into that last year because of some of the injuries that they had to deal with. And so we'll see. But honestly, Coach, when you add that up, it's really a decent-looking roster. I agree with your mindset that just because they have these right now 9 guys, I had 10 on my 53-man.
So did I.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that they won't be adding one, that they won't be looking for either another corner or another safety. There's some hybrid possibilities with the nickel and the safety, and then obviously Jarian as a cornerback nickel.
Right.
Those can all happen.
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll see. I don't think we can predict anybody that might be floating out there. I've been looking at this waiver wire or release, the release thread. There's some names out there that are worth looking at. That's for sure.
Yeah, there always are.
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye on that. All right, so last game of the preseason, it really wasn't fair.
Right.
It was a mismatch on all different levels because Jacksonville needed to get their work in with starters. Atlanta said, we're not doing that.
Right.
And so it was a beatdown, 31-0.
Right.
You shouldn't be surprised by that. But coming out of that, how do they maintain the intensity, the level of practice, everything they did in camp to get ready for Miami?
Well, it's game week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now it means something.
Yeah.
And I think that, they'll be – and this isn't a finished product yet.
Right.
This week right now, they won't work that much on Miami.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to work. It's almost like a bye week.
Right. That's kind of how I would describe it.
You're going to take 2 of those practices, and you're just going to keep developing your guys. You're going to continue to make sure you got the right guys in the right spot. And the entire practice, you're going to have the guys that are going to be playing, because the only thing, they did a great job, in my opinion, of finding out who can do what in the preseason by switching guys around, putting different guys together. But now this 2 weeks is about guys' continuity. You talk about the offensive line playing together. Well, you also got to talk about the DBs playing together. They've got to be able to talk to each other. The linebackers have to talk with the defense. There's so much communication involved. Now, this first couple of practices, they'll do that.
Right.
Then they might use one of the practices this week to start on Miami, and then they're into a game week the following
that's going to be – it really is going to be so much fun just to see what this team does matchup-wise against the Miami Dolphins, because you're talking about dynamic receivers in Hill and Waddle. We know what Tua represents. He throws for a lot of completions, throws for a lot of yards.
Here's my key to the Miami game right now.
Yeah.
Rush the passer.
Yeah, you better believe it.
That's it.
Get him off of his spot.
It's it. If they rush the passer, and I'm not even counting, we're going to move the ball offensively.
Yeah.
If we rush the passer and force him off the spot, we win.
That's Trayvon, that's Hines Allen, and it's Eric Armstead.
And you haven't seen what they're really going to do defensively.
Yeah, with him. With the whole, I'm talking about the game plan is going to be completely different than what's going on to this point. You're going to see a little bit more pressure going on in this ball game. And by the way, the other side of the ball, they're going to try and rush the passer.
Yep.
And this offensive line better be ready to go.
That's the key.
Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, they're not healthy.
Right.
And that's a big, big, big key to this ball game.
I think Chubb is missing the game, right?
I believe he's going to be on the PUP.
Yeah.
And so we're going to kind of keep an eye on that. But you're looking at maybe some defensive liabilities on Miami's side, even though they're favored in this ball game, that aren't necessarily like, this team's coming in pretty dang healthy other than Dewey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that part I like. All right, real quick before we're done, guys that I'm predicting, I think we're both predicting, there's a chance for a Braswell to show back up.
Right.
A Joshua Cephas, who was a late pick, to show back, or excuse me, he was an undrafted, to show back up. DJ Coleman, Elijah Cooks, Eric Hallett, all these guys have chances. My man, Training Camp Trammell, has a chance to come back.
Absolutely.
Josh Proctor wasn't bad at times.
He wasn't bad. I'm not as high on him as some of the other guys.
Those other guys I like a little bit more as well. Right. We mentioned DeGuara. Terrell Edmunds, I'd be rooting for big time if he could come back. And then maybe a Blake Hance. It's not like anyone's going to be snatching him up.
Right.
And Tyler Shatley, we've been talking about it.
I think that would, just from an experience, from an experience standpoint, you know, at least he can line up and not going to beat you by making too many mistakes, you know.
C.J. Beathard released via injury settlement. Doesn't mean he wouldn't come back in some scenario. Injured reserve right now, Keelan Robinson, one of the draft picks, the running back out of Texas, and then Dewey Wingard, who is going to be sit on the sidelines for, I don't even know, Coach, 6 weeks probably is what we're looking at. And then Tayshaun Gibson's out for 6 games because he's suspended. Right. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm excited about the game getting going. I think the roster is better. Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens. And just remember one thing, guys. And again, I'm not predicting anything. I'm not going to predict the game. You guys will ask me that probably on the primetime show, but I'm not predicting. But I will say that we'll know what this team is all about in the first 2 ball games against Miami and Cleveland.
Yeah,
I'm saying that we're going to find out about pass rush and the center and 2 guards
blocking
in those 2 games.
Yeah, blocking and pass rush.
That's the key to go. And remember this, just as a positive. Miami didn't beat anybody with a winning record last year.
It's the truth.
They're playing another team that had a winning record last year. So as far as I'm concerned, I feel good about the ball game.
Yeah, and so that's really how you have to look at it. And I always like to lean on Leon's saying, it ain't we got to play them. They got to play us.
Exactly.
And that's how you got to look at it. And honestly, if you're going to snatch a game on the road early in this year, Miami's doable. Houston is doable.
Hey.
They won there last year.
Yeah.
Buffalo, I don't know. It's a great unknown. We don't know who Buffalo is right now.
Absolutely.
And so you got to look at it in a positive way. All right, Coach, always good. We appreciate it. Our head coach, Dave Campo, Joe C. We'll talk to you on primetime. We appreciate everybody tuning in, either Facebook Live or wherever you find us on the social platforms.
The Campo and Joe podcast is brought to you by Bold City Heating and Air. Fast and reliable AC service.